for all this hay they were making about this heat wave, the strangest thing about it is it's like 20 degrees cooler today, 15, 20 degrees cooler than it was yesterday, and there was no gigantic rainstorm or anything like that. So just the fluctuation is the weirdest aspect, and I don't know, I'd be more interested in knowing about aerosolized aluminum atmospheric injections than I would be about, running your regular car or your barbecue grill or something like that. I think you get more problems from stuff like that. But I wanted to talk some more about it seems like a catastrophe to me in court, what's going on with Felix Sater. Every day, it just seems like he's losing like crazy. And I was able to spend pretty much the whole day there today, which was good. I don't always have that opportunity. But we were back today with Robert Wolf, the former attorney, longtime former attorney and friend of Felix Sater. And again, his wife is having some kind of surgical procedure, so he had to leave again, and he, I think, is coming back tomorrow or Wednesday or something, but there's more questioning to be done of him. And there was a character in the galley today, the gallery, the audience. If I had to guess, I'd say he was Robert Wolf. I'd say he was Robert Wolf's son. He just looked just like him. And in fact, when I first walked in the room, I thought it was Wolf. But I was like, damn, the guy really looks young. And this was somebody maybe in his 30s, but same kind of beard, same kind of hairstyle, same complexion, same face of his shape of his face. It just had to be his son. I didn't speak to the guy, but Felix Sater did, and I presume he told him don't talk to Jason, but I don't know what that guy was doing there, maybe taking notes for his father or just observing. I don't know. There are a bunch of people who appear to be law students, but I asked them today if they were law students, and they said they're not allowed to speak to anybody. Then I noticed they had some badge. One woman in their group had a tag, and they're young, they look like they're law students. Maybe they could be new U.S. attorneys or DOJ employees. I don't know who these people are. It just seems to me that there's lawyers, people who look like they're from Kazakhstan, to the extent that I know what that looks like. They sort of look halfway between Russian and Chinese. And me. And then there's also this guy, what's his name? Matthew, that guy who runs the Inner City Press. I saw him there. This is him on Twitter. What's his name? Yeah, Matthew Russell Lee. So this guy, have people seen this Inner City Press? I don't know what's going on with this guy, because it was funny. I didn't actually notice him in the courtroom at first. I noticed that this guy's airing out his turbo 911. But I noticed that this dude was live tweeting. This isn't it. This is his website. Now this is confusing here because he's talking about old cases. See here, he's saying there's some case coming up. Inner City has covered the litigation with Felix Sater with another proceeding coming up on August 23rd, 2022. So what the hell is he talking about? Because he's just had coverage of this from the other day, but now he's talking about 2022. I don't know what's going on that Inner City Press website. I don't know what's going on with that guy. I first heard about him because he was covering my cases. It's like, what? I wanted to ask him, do you cover everything in the Southern District of New York? Because it doesn't seem like that would be possible for one person to do. So why was he interested in my case? What does the Emmys have to do with Felix Sater if you aren't investigating counter lawfare? Oh yeah, the reason I wanted to come onto 23rd Street here, maybe we'll look at it more on the way back, but look at all this stuff that's closed, and this is a church basically that or is this the church? There was a church right around here that let homeless people hang out, but this is talking about somebody got shot at 233. I don't know. It's just a wreck here on 23rd Street. Peloton went out of business. Kind of a lot of things. And this is a major street. The city is buying electric Mustangs so that the police can, you know, I don't know, drive around and save money. It seems like a bad car to have as a police car. But anyway, back to the Felix Sater thing. So Wolf is back there getting cross-examined by the plaintiffs now. Oh, is it gonna rain? And there were so many sidebars today. So, okay, so I got there early. We got an opportunity to hear the conversation between the lawyers and the judge. And this judge has a much more appropriate demeanor than Valerie Caproni. Like Valerie Caproni, like, you remember when you were a kid and you're like driving somewhere with a friend and it's like the friend's mom driving and maybe you don't know that friend that well and the mom freaks out and yells at your friend and you're just like, man, this dude's mom is crazy. That's like Valerie Caproni. Just a lunatic. But just a really bad temperament, just very prone to anger. It's constantly insulting the litigants even in her rulings. She wrote ridiculous crap about me, insulted Snyder like crazy when he was my attorney. I mean, in retrospect, as I look at him now, he's just a mess. And I keep forgetting this third guy's name because he's representing Mem. And again, I'm not trying to become the world's greatest expert on Felix Sater. I feel like Julie got upset because, you know, she's like, this is like Game of Thrones or something, and she's the super fan, and I'm like coming to be competitive or something. I don't care what she's writing about Felix Sater, and I'm not trying to override what she's doing or take anything away from her. In fact, I really don't care what she's writing, to the extent that when I first contacted her, I was interested because I didn't know anything about Felix Sater. But now, after all the stuff that we've been through, I don't care what she has to say about this because I don't think that anything that she's saying is trustworthy or reliable. So I don't understand why she's so intent on counteracting what I say. But what I've come to realize is it's interesting because, well, we'll come back to Julie. Let's stay on Robert Wolf because this is what I was going to get to. So Wolf, there was a sidebar in progress when I got there, which I guess they do that, right, because there were people who weren't lawyers who were in the courtroom. Me and a couple of these other people who are, I don't know, from Kazakhstan or the law firm or whatever, just sitting there. So they were having a sidebar, and then they were also having a whole conversation. Oh yeah, Sater was sitting there fanning himself with a notebook, which I found weird because it's been much cooler today than it has been, you know, yesterday and the day before. And the air conditioning in that court is just insane. Look at this gigantic thing this guy is right. It's dangerous. It's disrespectful. Get off of that thing, you asshole. Stupid jerk. But I mean, it was like freezing in the room and Sater was fanning himself. I found it odd. I mean, he's wearing a suit, okay, but it was like 67 degrees in the room. It was pretty cold. So he's fanning himself, and there's just like a very animated sidebars. Now, what was this? City MD out of business. This giant thing out of business. Oh yeah. So they're right, because they were in the sidebar. Basically, Snyder was arguing about wanting to bring in all of this information that they did not want him to bring in. And so they went to the sidebar, and Snyder's hands are flying all around or whatever, and he's going crazy, and I could hear the judge over the static for the first time. And this judge is pretty soft-spoken even when they're not having a sidebar and there isn't static. He's just kind of a soft-spoken guy. And you could hear him tell Snyder, stop, calm down. And that's just not what you want. And the Boies Schiller, so then the judge was talking and he couldn't hear what he was saying, but the Boies Schiller Flexner lawyers were kind of just like looking down and nodding their heads. Snyder was looking around, and there's a woman who, there's all these support lawyers with Boies Schiller, or maybe they're not lawyers, I don't know what they are, but there's sort of like two main guys who are speaking for Boies Schiller Flexner, and then all these other lawyers running around. And one of those female lawyers was sort of like stepping away from the fray. Again, like when somebody else is getting yelled at and you're not, it's sort of like, okay, I'm not in this, let's back away. So I'm reading the body language of all that. Oh yeah, and so then the judge leaves and they go to get the jury and all that, and so the room is sort of empty of adults and authority, and Felix Sater turned around and stared at me with his best Russian mafiosa tough guy stare. Like, I guess he thinks he's gonna intimidate me, but that didn't work. And so, yeah, those guys were nodding. Oh yeah, and at the beginning of the day, right, so the third guy comes over to me, the guy who's representing Mem, I forget his name, anyway, and he's like, oh, I wore a tailored suit today because I didn't want to hear more criticisms of the suit. And I told him he still looked like shit. And he did, because the point is the suit needs to be well tailored. You yourself need to be not a sloppy mess, and also dry clean the damn thing. All of the legal team for Felix Sater look like they get home, they ball up the suit, they throw it in a duffel bag, and then the next morning they just wake up and put it on. John Snyder had, you know how on a men's suit in the back there's like that little flap that hangs down over your ass? There was some sort of strap around that I guess is on the inside of the suit, that somehow this was on the outside. I've never seen a suit do that before, but Snyder had that. And it just, to me, doesn't send the signal that you've got it together. But after a bathroom trip, or maybe somebody told him, that little error got rectified. These are minor things. I'm just trying to give people some color as far as, what I'm seeing there in the court. And I got a question for our legal eagles. I don't know the answer to this, because remember, I'm not an attorney. So for attorneys who are watching this and say, oh my God, Jason's an idiot, Felix Sater experts who watch this and say, oh my God, Jason didn't know this or that. I'm not trying to be a Felix Sater expert, and I'm not an attorney, so it's possible that there's a lot about both of those things that I don't know. But again, what was it that Julie was trying to do? She was saying, no, don't listen to these things that Jason is saying. Here's this blog that I created. This is all the correct information about Felix Sater. She's trying to force the official story down your throat. And we're going to come back to Robert Wolf. Here, there's like a Queen Elizabeth dog. She has like 40 of those. Oh, well, she's dead, so she has none. But I saw some picture of a plane, and they had this whole troop of dogs coming out, and they said, this is Queen Elizabeth's corgis riding on the plane. Pretty ridiculous. I don't know how British people stand for that. But Snyder's getting yelled at by the judge. Matt Schwartz was smiling after the sidebar, because the judge obviously was screaming at Snyder. So the upshot of what Snyder was attempting to do today, and this sounded crazy to me, this seems like just a terrible idea. Snyder was saying that, okay, Judge, he's asking, sort of like going through the questions that he's going to ask for the judge to tell him, yeah, you can ask that, or no, you can't. Because remember, they've had to, this motion in limine, as far as I understand it, sort of sets the parameters for what evidence can or cannot be used. And I spoke about this the other day, how there's one lawyer who started working for the bank in 2013, so they weren't allowed to ask her questions for the sake of truthfulness of the answer. Like, in other words, this is a difficult concept to wrap your brain around, and I hear lawyers getting yelled at for making mistakes with it, so it must be not just difficult for me, but the concept is You can't go into court and say, oh, well, this other person told me this, and that's my testimony. You can mention it's a fact that it was said, but you have to have your own independent knowledge of the truthfulness of the thing. Like if you witness something happen, then you can testify about it. But if somebody just told you that it happened, that's hearsay. So you can't ask this lawyer lady from the bank about stuff before 2013, and they don't want anybody to ask Felix Sater about stuff after 2015 because it's got to do with the signing of this, what is it called again? ACC? Something cooperation agreement? CAA, the Confidential Assistance Agreement, that's what it's called. So you can't talk to Sater about stuff after 2015 for the truthfulness of that stuff. He can sort of just say something happened or whatever. I don't know. Lawyers watching will know more about the details of exactly how that works. But okay, so right, so Sater, they're then collecting all the jury people and whatever, and Sater is talking to this guy who looks like Peter or Robert Wolf's son. The Snyder team was frustrated, and Wolf is not available in the afternoon, so they were upset about that for a minute. And then 30 minutes of sidebar. There was a lot of sidebar going on. Another sidebar. Snyder was upset. The entire court was waiting for Snyder. So after the sidebar, they all left, and they were like, okay, be back by such and such a time, and then Snyder was late. So then the third guy with the tailored suit that he didn't bother taking to the dry cleaner or pressing said, oh, Judge, I'll call Snyder. And then Snyder didn't answer. So, I mean, again, the judge was getting annoyed. I don't know why my brother does this, just like always late. I don't know why Snyder thinks that's okay. This judge kind of doesn't like him already, but whatever. The entire court was waiting for Snyder. Negotiating with, what does that say? Fletcher. Oh yeah, right. Oh right. Fletcher's the guy who runs the courtroom. So he's negotiating with Fletcher about where's Snyder, and Felix Sater enters smiling with Snyder. I found that strange. And then this guy with the tailored suit says, "Oh, Judge, this was so. These lawyers, they suck at sales." Because he's like, oh, Judge, you know, Robert Wolf has nothing to do with Mem Energy, that Mendy Mushkin, whatever his name is this guy's client. He wasn't there today. And he said, I'm not interested in this at all. Can I step out? And the judge said, no. And I was like, yeah, that was terribly proposed, tailored suit guy. Why don't you step out to the dry cleaner? So he had to sit there and do that. And it's like, when you're losing, don't ask for stuff like that. It just seemed like a terrible idea to me. So the Wolf is back up on the stand, and they were talking about this Tri-County mall. I mean, remember, the basic upshot is that Wolf was dealing with Sater when Sater's company, Litco, was trying to get hired through Arcanum to work for the bank, BTA Bank. So the bank is trying to recover like $1 billion or more than $1 billion of stolen money. They're working with this international intelligence firm called Arcanum, and Arcanum is going to hire as a subcontractor Felix Sater. Now it's interesting because, I don't know, Felix Sater, he's not really a professional investigator. He's a stockbroker. He's just sort of like a little bit of everything, according to him. And right, so the thing that Snyder was arguing about is, he's like, well, Judge, I know we, spent all this time and motions and you reading them and responding to them and writing things about it to keep out all of this stuff about Felix Sater working for the DIA and CIA and FBI and whoever the hell it is he's working for. That's been kept out, and whenever anybody was like trying to mention that, they would object right away, and the objections would be sustained, and you couldn't talk about that at all. So now today, Snyder says, well, we need to talk about that because the second Felix Sater conviction, which was for money laundering and fraud, right? Some sort of stock market fraud. He was convicted. I don't know if he was convicted for money laundering or accused of money laundering, but it was some sort of stock fraud that he went to jail for. And that, I believe, was where the 1998 Andrew Weissman agreement came from. We got some straight from the horse's mouth details today, which were very, very good. Again, I don't want to rely on Julie's stupid blog. I want to rely on the closest to the source that we can get. And in this case, we've got Felix Sater testifying under oath. I'm not saying that I don't think Felix Sater would lie, but this is the closest we're going to get to a guarantee that he's not doing that. So Snyder says, well, the second conviction doesn't make any sense if we don't explain it in the context of the first conviction. And I said, boy, that's interesting. So we got some details today. The stabbing in the face occurred in 1991. But there was several years that transpired before he actually was tried for that. So the fight was in 1991 and the conviction was in 1994. And he said that he spent 3 months in Rikers Island. Isn't that interesting? I would have thought that they would get to him in the federal prison, but of course it doesn't matter. And anyway, Rikers Island is exactly where the New York Post said that Venezuelan gang member was, who then shows up at FIT dressed as a Hamas member, very concerned with covering his face. And when I showed that picture to a police lieutenant, sir, thank you for putting out that cigarette before you entered the park. That was very polite of you. Most people wouldn't do that. Thanks. It's just interesting that the Venezuelan gang member seems to get integrated into the police gang a day after being in Rikers Island. And here's the nice guy's dog. And this dog seems to be in love. Oh, now he's in love with the other dog. They're in love with every dog. But it seems like Rikers Island could be where they're just like plucking these guys out of. I don't know. Felix Sater said he spent 3 months in Rikers Island. Then he hired an attorney who put up an appeal bond, and then he appealed, and he got out of jail. So maybe that attorney was Robert Wolf. That would make sense. And maybe from being in jail in 1994, that might lead to the cooperation agreement in 1998. I mean, I think he's not telling us everything, of course, but anyway, Wolf was back on the stand, and Wolf represented Sater with this Tri-County Mall thing. They were going through a bunch of emails. Right, and they had 2 letters they were talking about in this email. One is for settlement purposes and one is on the record. I mean, it's just interesting because I talk about lawfare. There's going to be a Venn diagram where there's a lot of regular stuff that lawyers do that's really technically kind of lawfare-y. Like what they're talking about here with 2 different letters is that a settlement letter, there's rules about these settlement letters, and you can't use, I spoke about this yesterday, you can't use the content of a settlement letter against the person who's giving it to you or whatever. So they had these 2 different letters that they were talking about. But I mean, again, that whole thing just reeks of screwy deals being made. And they're just trying to get to, that really didn't conclude. So they were trying to get to this guy admitting that he knew that Krapanov controlled these entities. The email discusses negotiating directly with Krapanov, and the problem that they're having is he's saying like, well, I don't know, that's what the email says, but I don't have specific recollection.
Anything.
And I did not know this, Ablyazov is the father-in-law of Krapanov, or maybe I knew that, but when they mentioned it, I was like, I better write that down again. And then there's also this guy, Philippe Glatz. That's a strange name to me. Philippe sounds very French, and Glatz sounds very Jewish. And of course there are Jewish French people. I don't think there's that many. But Felix, he's a pretty religious guy, right? He was going to this Chabad, which is kind of, that's more serious into Judaism than I am. I mean, it's not like he's walking around with a yarmulke everywhere, but
That's insane.
that's further up the line. And his friend, Mendy, as I said, he was wearing, I can't remember if he was wearing a hat or a yarmulke, but he was clearly dressed up like an Orthodox Jewish guy. So I don't think Felix is somewhere in between me and Orthodox. So maybe he's conservative Judaism or something like that. But he's inviting his rabbi to FBI parties, whereas I would probably try to find the hottest model if my parents weren't coming with me or whatever. I wouldn't invite my rabbi. My rabbi died. I don't really have a rabbi. But my point is, if there was a French Orthodox Jew, perhaps he would be named Philippe Glatz. I don't know much about this guy. I'm just guessing at that. But he, according to testimony today, was a shill and a front for Krapanov, and he's involved with this thing SDG. So they were just going through a lot of different real estate deals and trying to determine if this money for the Tri-County Mall deal came from Krapanov or Ablyazov, and Wolf said he has no recollection. So that's the thing. He's got a pretty good out. I mean, he can look at all these emails and just say, well, it was 11 years ago. I don't really remember. And then Wolf was asked about Sater holding fraudulent funds, and Wolf mentions Neil Bush. It's interesting, Matthew Lee Russell was also very interested in Neil Bush. The other interesting thing about Matthew Lee Russell is that I did not see him in there before today. Maybe I did and didn't notice him, but it's not like he's in there all day following this. And I saw him in there for just minutes today. And I said, oh, there he is. I'll talk to him later. I want to ask him, why was he covering my case? Because I don't remember specifically, but I do remember the first time I started noticing that inner city press, I started thinking, this seems like a stupid Mario World blog. Like they seem to be covering my case in the way that somebody who likes George's brother would. And I wanted to talk to him about that. Like, is this guy covering all the lawfare, FBI sponsored? Like, what is this guy's deal? He also had a laptop with him. So I stand corrected. I guess there is some way for journalists to get authorization to bring electronics. I thought each and every judge for each and every case had to give you specific clearance to do that. So if that's the case, did he get that from this judge for this case? That would make sense if you planned on covering it and writing all about it and writing a book about it or whatever. But it doesn't make a lot of sense if you're just like popping in there for a portion of the testimony and then leaving. I'm not sure what's going on with that guy. But what was interesting is what I noticed on the Inner City Press Twitter is that he was live tweeting Felix Sater's testimony on Friday. I think it was on Friday morning or something. I couldn't be there, or whatever time it was that I couldn't be there was when Felix Sater was testifying and when that guy was there. And he's gone from live tweeting Felix Sater's testimony to not even being there. And I don't believe Felix Sater was originally scheduled to testify again today. That might have been a surprise as a result of them wanting to now tell everybody that he stabbed this dude in the face rather than keeping that a secret from everybody, which they had been previously. Incidentally, the jury looked fairly nonplussed when Sater testified about that, so he definitely did a good job. There's no doubt that Felix Sater is an excellent salesman, pitchman, raconteur, bullshit artist, and he does appear to be very comfortable testifying under oath. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he is. I can't outright accuse him of lying, but in other words, there's a note in here that'll go over exactly the point I want to make about him. So Wolf didn't recall most things. He didn't recall anything about Ablyazov being accused of laundering money. And he was asked about Sater holding the fraudulent funds. He mentions Neil Bush. That's interesting. I don't know why. Wolf says illegal money. They asked him if you because during his testimony on Friday, Felix Sater was asked a question about, this is dirty money, and he said he doesn't care, he would invest it anyway. So now they were asking Wolf, if the money is illegally obtained and then you invest it, isn't that money laundering? And Wolf said it could be. Well, this is when he was being cross-examined by the plaintiffs. And my opinion is that Wolf has said and done a lot of things that might not be 100% kosher to benefit his friend Felix Sater. That's my opinion. I can't prove that. Other people might look at the evidence that caused me to form that opinion, and they might form another opinion. You've got to be very careful when you're saying that you think someone who is a lawyer is lying, because it's just my opinion. I look at the guy, I listen to what he says, turn my head a little bit, and I say, it doesn't sound completely on the up and up to me. But anyway, that's the impression that I get. And basically, Sater gave some of the money to his wife, is what the guy said. This was hilarious. So then they had a check from Victoria's Gourmet Food for $20 million. But Victoria's Gourmet Food, that was going into escrow. So remember, there was 36 million, and because wasn't a Blazoff, it was the other guy, Krapanov, told Felix, we're not going to pay you. So Felix just kept the 20 million. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would you tell the guy if you're not going to pay him while he still had the ability to keep your 20 million? Wouldn't you want to fool him into thinking you were going to pay him until you had all the money and then screw him out of the money? The whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And these guys are all, or many of them are convicted criminals. So like being aware that somebody could scam you, it just all seems to fit together too well. It doesn't make sense to me. But there was this check for $20 million, and they showed the check. It had 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, it said 20 million. Howdy. Nice golden. But then just wrote $20, TWENTY, so the check bounced. And I mean, but they also made some comments that it's like, what, check from the bakery or whatever that thing, Gourmet Food, for $20 million? Can you even write a check for $20 million? Can you even, is that a regular bank account that you have $20 million in? None of that makes any sense to me. But anyway, oh, and they showed the ledger from the law firm, and it said Felix Sater. And they were like, oh, that's just a typo. And I said, is it? Or is Philippe Glatz, perhaps, is that a guy? I don't know. Is that an identity duplexing thing for Felix Sater? I don't know. It just struck me as weird. But then there was another thing in that ledger where Argonne Holding Company wired them 20 million. I think you wire 20 million. Like, wouldn't you have 20 million in some account controlled by some brokerage firm? And because if you put $20 million in the bank, if the bank fails, you're getting $250,000 back. I just don't think you would have $20 million in a regular Victoria's Baking or whatever, Victoria's Gourmet Food. That's just something very weird about that. And Wolf even said it's the only time he ever saw a check for $20 million, and that bounced. So, and then there was $950,000 that paid their Moses Singer legal fee. That was from Sands Point Partners. Felix Sater, see how that works? Felix Sater, I believe, has or had at some point a fancy house in Sands Point. Here's a dog wearing shoes. And he interviewed Tom Arnold there. I'm pretty sure that was his Sands Point house. But this Sands Point Partners that paid the law firm is That's Felix Sater. So then the lawyer for Boyce Schiller brings up this American Bar Association. It was kind of like it's almost just like a guidebook. It was, I forget what it called. It was called like voluntary best practices or something like that, you know? Definitely not like this is mandatory and everybody has to do this. It was like a guide for lawyers for how to, red flags for, you know, fraud and nonsense and stuff like that. And so one of the things that it said, one of the biggest things that came up was this masking of beneficial ownership of the client. That is saying if the law firm doesn't know who owns the thing that's paying it, that you're not really being a responsible lawyer because you could be involved in money laundering and enabling crimes and all this stuff that you probably won't want to do if you're an actual normal lawyer, but who the hell knows. So Wolf recalled they'd start talking about the alter egos and how there's an email talking about how some of these companies are alter egos for Krapanov, and now he's saying he doesn't remember that. Because remember, the big issue with the bank is that they've signed a contract with Litco, and they're saying, hey, nobody who is a Krapanov or an Ablasioff entity can be released from this agreement. They're releasing Litco. They're signing this the confidential assistance agreement with Arcanum, and Arcanum is saying, hey, we have this contractor here, Litco, so let's sign this contract, and we're going to release Litco. I want to ask somebody this, and I mean, a lawyer will tell you without understanding all the parameters of the deal they don't know, and that's the nature of this type of complicated business. But why would you sign a release? Like, if someone comes and says, hey, I got to ask Bob Bishop. If Bob Bishop got hired by somebody to be a forensic accountant, does he make them sign a release that said you can't sue me for stealing the money? Because that's what this contract looks like to me. Every day that I'm going there, increasingly what it's starting to look like is these guys were desperate to get the bank into a contract releasing these entities, and then Sater is coming to them saying, hey, I have all these witnesses who are going to help you find the money, but you have to release them and say that you're not going to sue them to get the money back. And it seems to me, I haven't proven this yet, I could be wrong, but it seems to me that Felix Sater just went and got all the guys who stole the money, or a portion of the guys who stole the money, and said, hey, come work with me and I'll get these guys to release you from getting prosecuted, because the release is coming from Kazakhstan. So we'll basically release you from criminal prosecution and lawsuits, and you're going to get 16% of the money. Seems like what they're doing to me. Like they knew who stole it, and they just went to the bank and said, yeah, we'll help you find it, just sign this release. And what the bank is saying is, we did not know that this company Litco was Felix Sater, and Felix is saying, yes, you did. But in the getting to the how they knew, we're finding out some pretty interesting things. So then the guy is asking Wolf, yes or no, Felix Sater was convicted of money laundering and securities fraud, and Wolf said he doesn't recall. That really doesn't seem honest. You're his friend for 20 years. You've signed all these secret agreements with him and on his behalf with Weissman. You've written all these letters and all kinds of stuff, and you don't recall? That sort of reeked of, what does the FBI say? Lack of candor is what that seemed like. So the other thing is, they're saying that structures with no legal purpose is another red flag. So all of these different companies, like, you know, baking companies that happen to have $20 million, they can just write you checks for. This is the kind of thing that any regular person would be wondering what the hell is going on. Also, touching the money. So they're saying that entities that are paying things through lawyers and other entities or whatever, these are all red flags. And what the plaintiffs were getting at is that this is everything, that use of shell companies, all of this is the stuff that, this is just Felix Sater's bread and butter. So he says that Wolf had represented Litko in a bunch of things, but it was set up by another law firm, Todd and then I didn't hear the second part of what he said that law firm was called, but he said it was a good law firm. And Sater formed Litko specifically to recover these Kazakh assets, which just stinks to me like a fake company that he's making to just be like, yeah, I'm an investigator, I'll help you find this stuff. I could be wrong. But Litko was represented by Moses and Singer, and Litko paid Wolf $50,000. There's no billing record with Moses and Singer. Somebody, I think, is what, that must be what Wolf said. But in September of 2018, Schwartz asked in a deposition what Felix Sater's interest was in Litko. And Wolf testified that Schwartz asked about Litko. Or maybe Wolf gave that testimony that Schwartz had asked about that. Maybe it was Wolf giving that testimony in the deposition. And Wolf, oh yeah, so that was testimony, and then in the hearing, so Wolf was a witness, he wasn't a party, and the judge determined that he lied. And Wolf was pissed about that today. He said he disagreed with that, and he was annoyed because he wasn't a party to the suit, so he couldn't answer that. It just sort of sat on the record, and he was going on and on about his 41-year reputation and his record as a lawyer, and that was wrong, and blah, blah, blah. So, maybe that affects the jury, but a judge found that he lied. And Wolf disagrees with the judgment. He was a witness at a sanctions hearing against Boys. It was a sanctions hearing against Boys Schiller Flexner, and he's testifying there, and that's where it came out. See, it's interesting, these sanctions hearings, that's kind of sounding a lot. I need to find out who the judge was in that hearing, because that sounds very similar to what happened in my sanctions hearing. They're so eager to nail me. Judge Caproni called a show cause hearing, and at that hearing was where all this stuff about the email came out, and that's where I found out that Sam Eichner revealed the email address, and that sanctions hearing has created this problem for them where I'm now moving in the case, doing all these 60B4 motions and all that kind of stuff. So that's interesting. This fits the pattern. I mean, of course, there's sanctions hearings in all kinds of cases, but I'm just interested when stuff like this comes up. And this guy, Matthew Schwartz, what's his reason to lie about not knowing that Litko? So they're saying that the plaintiffs are lying because they don't want to pay Felix Sater. But it seems to me that if you're in Kazakhstan and Sater doesn't want to go there because he's afraid that somebody's going to kill him, and you owe him money, all you have to do is not pay him. How is he going to get that? You don't need to sue him in order to not pay him. So that Felix Sater excuse doesn't make that much sense to me. And there's just something about the way this guy Matthew Schwartz argues that makes me feel like he's being honest. And he's a lawyer, so I don't know him. I have no interest in lawyers. It just doesn't make sense that he would lie about this. And anyway, so Wolf disagreed with that judge, and then he had to leave. Now, there was also I was looking for eye contact between Wolf and the guy who I suspect was his son. And Wolf already knows that I'm asking him questions in the bathroom about Valerie Caproni, and he's had days to speak to Sater about the fact that this guy Jason is here and don't talk to him. So if Wolf is sending his son there to take notes on what's happening in the way that I'm there taking notes on what's happening, he would tell the son, don't look at me and don't let people know that you're my son, even though you look exactly like me and have the same style where the suit is really nice and the tie is really well tied. I mean, these are guys who put themselves together in the mirror in the morning, probably have a sensible woman in their house who says, you look great, have a good day in court, and they leave. These three guys who are hanging out with Felix Sater don't look like that to me. My opinion. So then there was lunch. Actually, I had a nice lunch at this place, Sweet Green. I've never eaten there before. It's like a quinoa factory, but I kind of like quinoa. And then the grass-fed caramelized steak on top of that. It was very good. But so it said $17.99 on the board, and then with a can of water, that came to $27 somehow. So while I was eating that lunch, not well-dressed, but a guy wearing new-looking, clean, casual clothes and new sneakers, and looked like he had had a shower today, he just walked right up to me and said, can you help me out with something to eat? And I said no, but I was thinking, you should help me out. This was 27 bucks. So anyway, after lunch, now Sater was back up there. Now I'm trying to remember if this discussion about revealing the assault was in the morning or after lunch. And I'm also trying to remember when I saw that guy, Matthew, what's his name, with the SDNY blog. But I think it was maybe a surprise that Felix Sater was testifying again today, but it was Snyder cross-examining him. And oh yeah, okay, so Snyder is examining him, right. And they're saying you're not allowed to bring, okay, so they're gonna bring up the assault, but then he starts going to all the FBI, CIA, undercover intelligence community stuff, and the judge says no, absolutely no. You can't talk about all that. Because really that has nothing to do with anything in this case. And helping the US government doesn't seem like the type of thing that should get you any sort of benefit with another country. I get it if you've done a crime in this country and you're a secret agent. I don't think that should make a difference, because that creates a class of people who are basically granted the right to do whatever kind of crime they want. And there's more of that that's going to come up right now. But whatever. The judge decided, it's not for me to determine why. The judge just said, you can't talk about any of this intelligence stuff. And Snyder wouldn't let it go. Like, I couldn't believe the judge wasn't yelling at him. Caproni would have stopped this much sooner, but Snyder kept going on and on about all these different ways of approaching the prospect of wanting to tell everybody that Felix Sater is the Russian James Bond. Because I mean, that's what he does. That's all he does. Loretta Lynch has written letters for this loser saying that because he's done all this criminal stuff on behalf of the FBI that we say is national security stuff, that he now gets off from all these crimes and doing whatever he wants. And plus, we're going to use him to do crimes. I believe, from what we're seeing in court, that's the impression that I'm getting, that the FBI and whoever just gets him to do crimes all over against whoever they have an issue with, whether it's Kazakhstan or Jason Goodman or whatever, and these idiots get some, criminal enterprise spun up, and it has a negative impact on who they're trying to negatively impact, and by the way, you get to keep the money. So if the criminal operation is, we're going to sink Jason in this lawsuit against a fake company that George's fucking asshole brother cooked up while he psychotically sits in some RV watching this video, putting in comments into the chat. You're pathetic, Dave. Most people your age would be retired and hanging out with their handicapped son. Not on YouTube every day watching what I'm doing to inject nonsense in there, but that seems to be what these assholes do. I think the FBI wanted to negatively impact the city of Almaty and Kazakhstan,
How much it, 'cause it, 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 it,
So they told whoever
to do this whole operation, financially decimate the second largest bank in the place. We need to look into when the Clinton Uranium One deal was going on and what any of this might have to do with that. Now, wait a minute. Yeah, wait a minute. Somebody sent me this tweet. This is a letter from Wolf. This is his Moses and Singer. He's writing to Trump. 2015, June 23rd. This is days after this agreement is signed, and they're saying, hey, you know, you're running for president, so here's all this great stuff you're going to need to know about Felix Sater and his background. And so this is where he's, you know, supposedly revealing it to Trump. It's a little bit interesting that Trump wouldn't know this. I mean, by the way, just because he wrote this letter and this is officially recorded as, oh, this is where Trump finds out that Felix Sater is doing all this crazy stuff, doesn't mean that's actually true. This could be, you know, for the public to see. And here's where you see it's written by Robert S. Wolf. So you see, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go to court and gauge the demeanor of this Robert S. Wolf. Is he truthful? Is he lying? We learned today that one federal judge thinks he lies under oath. I think he's got a poor memory. He suddenly turned into an instant dick when I asked him in the bathroom about Valerie Caproni. I don't care for Robert Wolf. Anyway, they were talking about this guy, Joe Shetrid. He's a New York real estate developer. I don't know why they were talking about him. Oh, because they needed him to settle, right. So Felix convinced this guy to settle. Right, and so this is the guy, Garski, Peter Garski. Robert Wolf told us that Garski was getting impatient with Latham and Watkins in starting this investigation. And remember, it doesn't make a lot of sense that the money's been gone since 2009 or 10, or certainly they've been talking about this letter. Definitely nobody messes with you with that dog, right?
Nobody messes with me.
Not at all. That is a tough looking dog. Peter Garski. So he's getting impatient with Latham and Watkins, and he is speaking on behalf of Arcanum. And when they first started, Snyder just mentions Arcanum, and Boyce Schiller objected, and it was overruled. So then they start talking about Garski. He's impatient. And then the judge asks Wolf, oh, sorry, this is not Sater. This is Snyder. It says Snyder cross. So this is Snyder cross-examining Wolf. So Snyder mentions Arcanum, and then right away Boyce Schiller objects, and the judge says, no, you can talk about Arcanum, because Arcanum, they signed the deal. So then they're talking about Garski, and the judge asks Wolf to just answer the questions because Wolf is going into, I forget what they call it, but he's just like a soliloquy. He's telling you a story, and he's like, no. And see, that's the thing. This guy, Wolf, Robert Wolf, he's Felix Sater's friend, so he's not representing him as an attorney here, but there is good reason to suspect that he's trying to prejudice the jury in favor of Felix Sater, and I believe that's why the judge tells him to stop and just answer the question, and then the judge strikes what Wolf said. So I think the judge gets what's going on. And there was urgency, this is important, urgency surrounding something in Cyprus. And Felix Sater paid for some of these witnesses to fly to Cyprus, and Wolf couldn't remember. Maybe David Alishikov or Boris, whose last name I forget right now, but he's mentioned elsewhere. We can look that up. But Wolf is saying that Felix Sater paid for them to fly to Cyprus, and then Arcanum reimbursed Felix Sater. So they're basically trying to demonstrate, the Felix Sater side is saying, hey, you guys were working with Arcanum bank people, you were working with Arcanum, Arcanum was reimbursing Sater, and Arcanum knew it was Sater, so you knew. But what it seems like is there's a strong possibility that Arcanum is in on this deception. That's my opinion. That hasn't come up in court, and that certainly hasn't been proven yet. But Felix Sater paid for them to fly, and then Arcanum reimbursed Felix Sater. So I think, I have heard, they haven't shown this yet, but I have heard them mention that they plan to show travel expenses reimbursed and stuff like that. So maybe that's what we're getting to here. And we're already ahead of the Felix Sater team if it's this guy, Peter Garci, acting on behalf of Arcanum, doing all the reimbursing. Because I'll tell you what, I've looked at the, I'm pretty sure this is the Arcanum Global, I think this is the company, this is their website. And I mean, I've looked through this, Garski's not on there now, and I even went back, this is not a screen capture of the archive.org, but I did go back into that thing, and in 2013 and 2015, it doesn't show anybody there named Peter Garski, and I can't really find anything about this guy, Peter Garski. So I don't know what's up with Peter Garski, but there's something weird with this Arcanum, and I generally don't trust private intelligence companies that are run by former intelligence. You know, this is just another bullshit front for doing a bunch of things that the FBI wants to do and then say, well, we didn't do that. Felix Sater did that. And then get Valerie Caproni to be the judge and just let him off for whatever crimes he's doing. Seems to be the way they do it. Again, not proven yet. My opinion, a working hypothesis. So then they have this ledger from, I think, Moses and Singer, $450,000 in legal fees paid to Moses and Singer by Kazakhstan. I don't know why that was exactly, but it's pretty convoluted. So, oh yeah, I wanted to show everybody this thing over here. They've got this crazy portal, but it might be off now. This was this thing that people were yeah, it looks off. People were flashing their boobs or something, and then the other end of it is in Dublin. See that circle over there? I don't know. I think we need more businesses and less of this crap, more police, but whatever. So there's all this stuff going on with Cyprus, which, by the way, that's where that Privat bank is, that Hunter Biden was laundering all kinds of money for Burisma. Nothing at all has come up about that, but it's interesting. So Snyder is then surprised because the lawyers and the jury and the audience all have a video feed that shows the evidence, and then the guy on the witness stand has his own TV that he's looking at the evidence. And so Snyder, the exhibit comes up and he says, what the hell is that? Because it's all redacted. So then he hands a paper copy to the guy that's not redacted and starts talking about the redacted stuff and immediately gets yelled at again. So they says Arcanum, even though it is redacted, he gets an objection and an immediate sidebar because he's trying to talk about exactly what the judge has spent all morning telling him, you can't talk about that. So I mean, I kind of couldn't, like any normal person would be super angry at Snyder right now because he's just being annoying as hell and trying to do exactly what he's told not to do. So then it was stated that Garski became impatient with Latham and Watkins, and Garski took over negotiating the agreement. And now that sounds very weird to me because if you're a super duper international spy firm and you say, well, you know, we need lawyers for stuff that you need a bar license to do, like sue people and represent companies and stuff like that. But because we're such expert, super duper spies, we're great at negotiating. So we're going to do all this negotiation. We don't need a law firm for that. But they didn't say that. They hired Latham and Watkins and said, go negotiate this agreement with the bank. And then when Peter Garci is getting annoyed that it's taking too long, that he's in this big rush that is explained as there's assets that could be recovered if they act now, but he never explains why, if it takes 2013 to 2015 to talk about this agreement, and 2009 when they discovered that the stuff is stolen, why is there suddenly this rush? And so he fires Latham and Watkins and takes over the negotiation himself. Oh, and after that sidebar where Snyder is not allowed to ask about Arcanum, he just says no further questions, because they basically tell him, you're not allowed to talk about this crap, and he keeps trying to talk about it. I've discovered today, and again, this is going to be obvious to anybody who's spent any amount, it definitely seems like it's going to rain, any amount of time in court, that there are maybe less than scrupulous people who make a part of their strategy, we're going to say some prejudicial stuff, meaning we're just going to blurt something out on the witness stand that we know the judge is going to object, that the opposition will object to, and that the judge will, you know, strike from the record, but the jury is sitting right there and they'll hear it, and to a certain extent, once they've heard something, they can't unhear it. And so you can introduce this kind of prejudicial material. It's like a low blow in boxing, as I mentioned the other day. You're not supposed to do it, but if you do it once or twice, maybe nothing will happen, and you got the low blow in. It could weaken the opponent, and that could be, you know, this is a case that they're going to lose. So I detect that they're trying to do every single little tiny thing that they possibly can. And then the judge did something that I found quite weird. He dug both of his hands, like fully into his own hair. And I will say, this judge has an impressive head of hair for a guy who appears to be in his 70s. He's got a lot of hair up there. And he just started tussling it around in a way that seemed like a strange thing to do outside of your own bedroom or the shower or something like that. But whatever, we're just getting some insight into the judge's, you know, quirks and personality traits and whatever. But then that's when we start having Snyder saying he wants to talk about the assault and that he wants to bring in. So the judge is trying, and the judge was trying to convince him not to do that, because the judge was saying, you know, we've already spent all this time keeping it out and written all this stuff, and why do you want to do this? Because also remember, the judge might be thinking Snyder could be an idiot, and what's going to happen to Felix Sater, I don't know. But the judge spent actually a considerable amount of time trying to convince Snyder that this is crazy, that you're going to now introduce this evidence of this assault that we spent a lot of time setting things up and motions in limine to, you know, set up parameters of what you can and can't talk about. And then the last thing the judge said about it was he said, beware. He warned him to beware, but he said, okay, you can do it. So the first conviction is needed to explain the second conviction. And so, yeah, this I didn't know. In 1996, he got out of jail and he went to Russia. Maybe that's what you do when you get out of jail after you've grown up your whole entire life in the United States of America. You go to a country that you haven't known since you were 6 years old, that you left because of religious oppression and communism. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's the type of country that you would feel a connection to, that you would want to go back to. I wonder if somebody in Rikers Island didn't say, hey, we got a big problem here in Brooklyn with Russian organized crime, and we need some fluent Russian and English speaking people to kind of get embedded in that. What do you think about going to Russia and getting down with some criminals. Again, I don't know if that happened. I'm just guessing. But it could have. He went to Russia in 1996 after he got out of jail. And the judge says you can't talk about any of the intelligence activity. That was the final determination. You can talk about the assault and the conviction, but none of the intelligence activity. 1996, 1997, he set up money laundering with the encouragement of the U.S. government. So that's what I'm talking about. Did they say, okay, go to Russia and start getting into deals to launder money through banks, and we're just going to steal all the money from every bank in Russia and financially decimate Russia? We know that that's still part of their plan. So that came out. And all of this is excluded by the motion in limine. So Snyder wants to admit. Yeah, Snyder was arguing that he wanted to admit that the U.S. government taught him how to launder money. And I mean, again, I sort of agree with the judge. What the hell is the difference? So even if we make the determination that it's okay for the FBI or the U.S. government or whoever to decide when and who gets to launder money, if the U.S. government says, okay, we want you to go undercover to catch a money laundering ring and you're going to launder money in this way and that way, let's, for the sake of this argument, say that that's an acceptable thing to do. What is it that Snyder is trying to argue now? Felix Sater just decided to do this in Kazakhstan because the government taught him to do it, so because he's a nice guy from this other stuff, he shouldn't have to pay the bank? Or is he telling us only part of the story? I mean, again, when I come up with a theory, and the theory here is that Felix Sater has been working for the U.S. government to try to financially rout Kazakhstan, I might not necessarily be able to prove that theory on the first day that I come up with it, but I like it when more evidence gets introduced that strengthens my theory. I'm not the one who said that Felix Sater went to Russia in 1996 and was encouraged by the U.S. government to launder money. He did, or his lawyer did, under oath in court. So they're telling you that that's what he went to Russia to do. Certainly doesn't seem like much of a reach to think that he would have done the same thing in Kazakhstan, but Snyder admits that Sater is an expert in money laundering, taught by the U.S. government. And he was being just super dramatic and ridiculous. I found that weird. And the judge just said nothing about the intelligence community can come in, nothing about his intelligence activity can come in. The judge was getting mad. And he even told Snyder, he said, he's not going to allow him to introduce this stuff that is clearly calculated to play on the sympathy of the jury. And he was getting mad. And so then Schwartz, who's the lawyer, seems to be the lead for Boies Schiller, he said that Snyder keeps introducing matters that have been excluded, and that Snyder keeps trying to introduce this intelligence community stuff. And also, so this is where Schwartz was responding to Snyder's stupid crap, and he was saying that on Friday, Snyder had promised certain evidence that didn't arrive, and then so he sent a letter on Saturday saying it was coming, and it didn't come on Saturday, it didn't come on Sunday, and I think he didn't even get it on Monday. Snyder is desperate to get the intelligence information, and he keeps coming back to it. And he said, the judge said to Snyder, I wrote this in quotes because it really struck me. The judge said plainly, what you're trying to do is improper. You know it's improper. This was the angriest the judge has become. He didn't become angry, but it was a shift from his normal, super soft-spoken demeanor. And I almost couldn't believe that he wasn't getting more angry, because this was ridiculous what Snyder was doing. And he said, even talking about this, you're slipping in these things. So he doesn't want him to talk about it. And then Snyder wouldn't let it go. And then the judge said no. So that was like the end of it. And he told him he needs to review Federal Rules of Evidence 103. And then Schwartz asks the judge to instruct the jury when Snyder defies these orders, and the judge didn't say if he would or wouldn't, but Snyder got up and said, don't do that. So then, okay, now Felix Sater comes to the stand, and he's talking about this Moses Singer meeting, which Wolf spoke about on Friday, where they went to the Capitol Grill, and Wolf said that those guys were pounding booze. And they talk about Nick Borg, and they talk about, Elvira, whatever her name is, who maybe she's married to Krapanov, or a sister-in-law or something like that. Talk about all this different stuff. We talk about all these different real estate projects, the Porto Heli, some project in France, all these fancy projects he's talking about. He told them about this guy Didier Thierry, who's doing some kind of big hotel development in St. Bart's. He's got some domestic help training school in China, which the Chinese government was going to come in on, and the purpose of it was to train people how to be like nannies and cleaning ladies. Very weird. And then he spoke about Gazprom. So this is something that he said that felt false to me, but he said it under oath. He's talking about this guy, Pedalin, was a senior manager at Gazprom, and he says that Putin's wealth is attributed to Gazprom. So this is the biggest company. Like, what evidence do you have of that? What ownership does Putin have of Gazprom? I believe that's just an internet rumor that, I don't know, does Gazprom officially recognize? That sounds like bullshit, but it's one of these pieces of bullshit that permeates the mainstream psyche, so I guess the judge believed it, and it just went right by as if nothing at all was said. So then, then they bring up this whole, so now Sater is just sort of speaking extemporaneously on the stand about how he was extorted into building Nazarbayev's house. Nazarbayev, as I recall, is the president of Kazakhstan, and also remember, Kazakhstan is a plaintiff in this. So every time they say, oh, it's a dictatorship, or this guy extorted me into doing something, if you haven't been asked about that, that's you adding testimony and opinion that the judge is saying you can't do that because it's prejudicial towards the plaintiff. And you can't just say that. You need evidence. You can't just, come out and say Putin owns Gazprom, but they let him say that. So the judge got mad when Felix Sater that he was extorted into building this house and told him to move on. And he told Peter Garsky that Felix Sater told Peter Garsky that he kept the $20 million. And see, this Garsky thing is very interesting. There was somebody also named Laurent Fouchier who he flipped on Krapanov. And this guy was able to arrange for some kind of African passports for Krapanov. And Fouchier was the ambassador to the Central African Republic, which, if that's a country, I never heard of that. But then he was saying that there was an office in the same building, that these two guys had an office in the same building. And that just when he said it, it struck me as, this sounds like his MO, right? Didn't he and Michael Cohen share an office in Trump Tower? I just was like, what is he doing there? And then he also said that there was some woman from Arcanum who was at the meeting at Moses Singer, but Felix Sater made a point of telling us that Peter Darcy took that woman out of the meeting and kind of sent her home, and then the three of them went to dinner at Capitol Grill, where Sater confirms that they ordered bottles of wine after. They said that he said that Wolf was only there for part of the dinner. Wolf said he was there for dinner and then those guys stayed for drinks. Felix Sater said, no, Wolf was only there for half of the dinner, and after he left, we ordered bottles of wine and stayed there quite late. He made a point of saying that they stayed there quite late. And Blasio, oh yeah, and then he went into all this detail about how Blasio created a political party called Democratic Choice, and that he was, the opposition. Like, this seems to be the big move in Russia or former Soviet republics. If you're a criminal, you basically position yourself as a political opposition leader to whoever is in charge of where it is you're doing your crimes. And then when they throw you in jail, you just say, oh, this is, political, whatever. That seems to be what's going on there. But he says that Kazakhstan is a dictatorship, and he gets reprimanded by the judge for that. And he said, this was great. So they said that Sater offers his opinion that Kazakhstan is a dictatorship, and he gets reprimanded right away. And then who is this? Oh yeah, Kenis Rakishin gets objected to. So I don't know who that is. Sater called him the Fredo. Oh yeah, so this is like the vice president of the bank or something, and he's apparently an idiot that they put in there because he's in somebody's family. And then Sater says that that guy is the Fredo Corleone of the Krapinov crime family, and that gets objected to. And Snyder is yelled at in the sidebar again, and Snyder asks Sater's seems to be denying on intelligence information. Sater's, I don't know what I wrote there. So Garsky was extremely upset about how long it was taking, and Sater asked Garsky why he ditched Latham and Watkins. This is what Sater said. And he said that they wouldn't kick back money from the legal fees to Garsky. And immediately Boyce, Schiller, Flexner objected, and that objection was sustained. So Felix Sater is basically trying to get it in there that Peter Garsky was somehow getting paid by these law firms. And I mean, again, I got the impression that Felix Sater knew that that would be objected to, but he wanted to inject that doubt into the minds of the jury, and so the judge was pissed by that. Sater told Latham and Watkins, this was very strange to me. So Sater told Latham and Watkins to subpoena his bank about the Trump Soho payment. So the bank that Felix Sater was using was Chase here in New York. And so Sater tells Latham Watkin to issue a subpoena to Chase Bank for banking records for Felix Sater for his Trump Soho. I forget which company was investing in Trump Soho, but it was a Felix Sater company. And remember the other day I was talking about the $75,000 that he sent. You know, they had this whole flow chart of money laundering. $75,000 went to Trump Soho. So here we see Felix Sater putting $75,000 into Trump Soho, and then he goes and tells a law firm to, wow, that guy was just driving the wrong direction on a moped to get up on the sidewalk and almost got hit by a car. So let's just get this straight. Felix Sater has some construction company or investment company or real estate development company or whatever it is, sends $75,000 of this laundered money stolen from allegedly Kazakhstan, sends it to the Trump Soho while he's working for Trump. And we can already see what that's about, is that when you got Michael Cohen as your attorney sending payments to Stormy Daniels, you're going to go on trial for doing crap with Stormy Daniels. I have a feeling this was a different version of the same plan. Make some screwy payment from some screwy thing and make it look like you're doing it on behalf of Trump, then have some other law firm investigate it from some other lawsuit and just send it to a newspaper or something and be like, oh my God, look at this. Trump has got stolen Russian money that he's putting into the whatever. And I'm sure they were cooking up some stupid plan to nail Trump with that. Because what is Julie constantly saying? Oh, Felix could have set Trump up, but he didn't. And when she said that, remember she came into that Spaces to lay out that stupid narrative? That just seemed like a script to me. And their on-script thing is, see, Felix Sater is a great guy because he could have set up Trump, but he didn't. What I actually think this totality of stuff is showing us, that letter from Robert Wolf days after this agreement is signed, concurrent with Trump announcing that he's running for president, that's what happened. Felix Sater probably didn't know Trump was going to run for president. And when that happened, they just realized, uh-oh, there's going to be a lot more attention on all of this. We got to improvise with the plan. That's what it seems like to me. So Sater tells Latham and Watkin to subpoena Chase Bank and get this information about the Trump Soho payment. And that was from Bayrock Group. That was the developer. So he's got Bayrock LLC, Bayrock Inc., all these different names. And maybe this wasn't in that Bar Association book about what not to do, but we know from all these investigations with Charles that when people have a lot of similarly named things, I mean, you don't do that to avoid confusion. So Chase Bank got subpoenaed. Yeah, right. Judge told him to slow down while he okay, so right. So Felix Sater sort of blurts out this stuff about him, getting Latham and Watkin to subpoena this information, and then somebody from Boies Schiller objects, and the judge is, you see, this judge is so soft-spoken that sometimes people can't hear if he's accepting or rejecting the objections. And it just, my impression was that Felix Sater wanted this out because he's telling him to slow down while he contemplates the objection, and he just spit that out. BTA lost this case in California, according to Sater, because he wasn't involved. So they had already started suing, and Felix Sater is saying the reason they lost that case was because Felix Sater wasn't involved. He's trying to demonstrate that they've known all along that he is Litko. And it seems like there is a trick in here somewhere. Subpoena Chase for Bayrock Records. Oh yeah, and then so he goes on a tirade and the judge shuts him down. Sounds like Sater invested, then said there's a problem. And people get releases in exchange. Oh, because they also wanted apartments. So it seems like a shakedown where, maybe he was or maybe he wasn't involved in the theft, but he knows a lot of details about who did this theft, and he's able to get these witnesses released. And when you get, the Republic of Kazakhstan to release you, they've signed a thing. They can't, that's it, you're released. They can't go and charge you. And if you were, if you had that, let's say you're in the United States and there's going to be an extradition, even if Kazakhstan says, well, we got tricked, so we're not honoring this release, we're going to criminally charge you. If there is, or if in the future there will be some extradition treaty between the United States and Kazakhstan, you're going to have to go to a court to get extradited, and you go in there and say, hey, judge, look, they signed this agreement, they're releasing me. The federal judge might say, well, we're not going to extradite this guy because you already agreed to do whatever. But it seems like that's what he was trying to do. Sater said that he knew they could get 100 or 120 million from that guy, Shetty or whatever his name was. And Sater somehow got him to settle. How did he know he was going to be able to get that guy to settle? So he then the judge stopped them and explained to the jury that there are certain things that have been excluded. I thought he was going to tell the jury that Snyder and Sater were defying his orders and breaking the rules, but he stopped short of that. He just told them that there are certain things that have been eliminated. This judge seems to be the most fair-minded judge I've observed, certainly in a very long time. So that was good. He definitely could have gotten a lot angrier than he did. Garski knew, this came out, that only Sater and Wolf ever appeared on behalf of Litko in any of these meetings, and they're saying that Garski knew. Felix Sater says that Garski knew that Felix Sater owned Litko, and what I'm starting to feel is that either Garski and Sater or all of Arcanum and Sater were trying to trick the bank. And this was also, Felix Sater said this with great confidence and clarity, and it made me think it's quite important. I need to ask Bob Bishop about this, but he said that Litko was a single member LLC and it was member managed. He said it exactly like that, very concisely, as if he knew it very well. And why are they releasing Litko? I only met after, he said, yeah, I only met them after 3 seconds in my life, so the answer is no, in response to, are you controlled by Ablaziov? Right, so they were asking him all these questions, and when he said that about Ablaziov, clearly there's a lot going on with Sater. He had a lot of weird energy around anything to do with Ablaziov, and he said, I only, because he was going through it, are you, Krapanov? No. Are you this Krapanov entity? No. And then he said, are you controlled by Ablaziov? And he said, I only met them after 3 seconds of my life, so the answer is no. So he seemed nervous about that. I mean, this is a guy who English is a second language, but he's been in the United States since he was 6, so, he definitely seemed nervous around that question. Weird energy around anything to do with Ablaziov. And they said, this thing basically releases everyone, right? And he said, everyone except the family dog. I'm very upset my lawyer was not including Cosmo. And I just remember thinking, what is Felix Sater doing? He's up there doing shtick. He's obviously very familiar with the concept of making the jury like him and think he's funny and this and that. He's good at that. He's a liar. He's a manipulator. What do we got here? ZL1. This is, I think, a pretty crazy Camaro. Isn't this like a 600 and something horsepower supercharged? It is.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Where's the hospital at? Where's the hospital at?
I don't know. Where is the hospital at? Got to go down there. So he said, okay, this was also interesting. He said that all the people that he met with this Kazakh stuff were in nice buildings with high security, that he signed in and showed his ID. So again, they're trying to establish all the different ways that the bank would know that it was Felix Sater. But then he said, well, wait a minute. The one meeting, this stuck in my mind. He's saying that he signed in with security at Moses and Singer. So how would the Kazakhstan bank have any idea who is signing in to meet with Moses and Singer? It struck me as that might be, he's hanging them up on something like that. And then John Snyder said, well, use your real name, right? And he said, I always use my name, Felix Sater. He paused in a way when he answered that question that furthered in my mind a suspicion that I've had for a while, that I don't think Felix Sater is this guy's real name. Also fits with his FBI personality. And he said that getting Ablaziov was the most important thing to Kazakhstan. Timur Kualabrua. Right, this is the part that he stuck in. That he said the real owner of the bank is this guy, Timur Kualabazev, or something like that, who is the head of the Kazakhstan Sovereign Wealth Fund. This is the part that he stuck in that the judge hated. And they said, so would somebody sign this agreement without checking it carefully? And he said only if the signer wanted to get shot in the head, and right away they objected. So then Sater said he was born in Moscow in the USSR on March 2nd, 1966, and that his father was a manager of a meat store warehouse. He had difficulty describing, why didn't he just say his father was a butcher? That was interesting. Or in the meat packing business, he just said his father was a manager of a meat store warehouse. It was odd the way he put that. And then he said his mother was like a concert pianist or something like that, which was interesting. I'm discovering that Felix Sater is actually quite he seems to be a very inherently intelligent guy, but he makes a lot of bad decisions and has terrible impulse control. And the fact that his mother was a concert pianist, that's quite interesting. That's a complex skill. But yeah, he asked him, this was interesting and I didn't know this. And he said that he was sold by the USSR for wheat. And maybe I did know this, but there was apparently part of the SALT Treaty, which was a nuclear missile ban. The United States was exchanging grain or giving grain to the Soviet Union in exchange for the release of Jewish people who were oppressed in the Soviet Union. And I didn't know these details, but the US government sent wheat to the USSR in exchange for Soviet Jews. And his family transited to some sort of refugee camp in Austria, and then they went to Israel, and then to Italy, and then to Baltimore. And then they settled in Brooklyn, where he went to PS 225 and John Jay Junior High School. And then, he mentioned a few other things, but he dropped out of high school and got a GED so he could go to college early. And then he dropped out of college early. I didn't know any of this. And he joined Bear Stearns when he was 17 years old. Had to wait to take the Series 7. He was a runner, which Charles has told me about. And obviously they still had in the 80s and 90s, but those are gone now. But that was an interesting little detail because it caused me to think, wait a minute. If you're the US government and you say, okay, we're going to get all of these Russian Jewish citizens out of the Soviet Union, you're telling me the FBI did not mine that collection of Russians and say, hey, you've been oppressed by this government your whole entire life. They kicked you out, sold you for wheat. Why don't you come work for us? Did they, at that point, why wouldn't they do that? Interrogate every single family, see who's smart, see who's dumb, and get the smart people involved in something. And maybe, I don't know, we know they love these familial, Adam Sharp, his father, the Swigert family seems to have a long, questionable history of possible intelligence work. How do we know that Felix Sater and his family didn't get integrated into some kind of intelligence operation when they were taken out of the Soviet Union and transferred to the United States? I don't know, but they could have been. Surgis Academy, he said he went to. Charles will know what that is. I don't really know what that is. Left high school in 10th grade. He was a limo driver at night, black car driver. Then he worked at Bear Stearns. The wait to take the Series 7. Then he entered Lehman Brothers as a stockbroker and became a senior vice president at age 19. Youngest senior vice president in the history of Wall Street. I want to ask Charles about that too. Seems a little bit Jeffrey Epstein-ish, slightly improbable. It's possible. He said he was one of the top performing brokers. And Steve Friedman, and then he mentioned it, I have found that name before. I have not found Mr. Friedman, but he said that through a mutual acquaintance, a meeting was set up with this guy, Steve Friedman. That's the guy he had stabbed in the face, and he went through that whole story of the assault and stabbing him in the face. But this meeting was set up. The fight was in 1991. The meeting happened sometime before the conviction, and he settled with Steve. Amazingly, Steve asked for only $50,000, the exact same amount that he settled that other lawsuit with the woman in Brooklyn who said that Kaz, whatever that guy's name is, Cam Kalsum, was hacking her computer. She also got $50,000. So is this just the price? Felix, you got money coming out of his ass. He wants to stab you in the face, 50 grand. He wants to hack your computer, 50 grand, whatever. But even after he got the 50 grand, the district attorney would not drop the charges. And he was sentenced to 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison, and after 3 months in Rikers Island, hired an attorney, and that attorney got him this appeal bond. He did not say that the attorney was Robert Wolf, but it might have been. And then he said that when he got out of jail, a lot of people from the neighborhood came to his house. So what do they say to you when you get out of jail? I don't know. Does Andrew Weissman live in his neighborhood? I don't know. But we learned a lot of interesting things about Felix Sater today, and I still think he's losing this case. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for sponsoring the show. Please get on to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Huge thank you to everybody who's sponsoring the show. Couldn't figure any of this stuff out without you.